Good evening, good morning, and welcome to Conversations to Create Change, brought to you by Bougie 11 Productions. I'm Divya Chandra, the founder of Women of India Summit and creator of the School of Life Alchemy. And I'm thrilled, as always, to have two of my favorite women on the show with us today. We've got Christine Agro joining us all the way from New York. Christine is a world-renowned, internationally recognized metaphysical and spiritual teacher and expert, and she's an internationally best-selling author, and you must check out her book, which I list in the comment section below. And I have my most precious co-founder of the Women of India Summit, Mudita Chandra, with me, who is our in-house relationship coach and has multiple businesses and multiple things she does. But the thing that she does best is hold a space of love and compassion for people and give them the most heartfelt counseling and advice. Today, we are talking about a topic that most people, I think, is not dinner table conversation, but something that we, with working with Christine and teachers like her, love talking about, which is the inner critical voice. And what started us off on this was a post that Christine wrote for Thrive Global called Stupid, Fat and Ugly, which I cannot recommend highly, which went viral, in fact, obviously. And it's such a great title for what we do to ourselves and what we allow ourselves to be done to in some ways. Christine, will you share a little bit about your post?
Sure. Thrive Global it focuses a lot on sort of nixing the self-critic. So it's something that they're always sort of searching for information on, and something came through and it was like, would you write a post on this? And I was like, yeah, I could write a post on that. So when I sat down to write it, what I heard in my head was my brother saying how I was stupid, fat, and ugly. And this was pretty much a mantra that he had when I was younger, that he would say over, and he would say it like over and over and over again. Like he'd be playing with a friend and I'd want to play because we were only 15 months apart. And the way that he would make me go away is he would say, like, go away, you're stupid, fat, and ugly. And this would it really just became, his way of interacting with me on so many different levels. And it wasn't like he just said it once. He literally said it over and over again. And so as I grew up, I found that because I really held him so dearly, that those words became my words, that they became the truth of who I was. And I really struggled at times with both my body image. And it's interesting because so I could prove that I wasn't stupid by just, learning a lot and excelling in my education. So that when I was able to sort of wipe away on my own, I've never felt that I am pretty or attractive. I don't think that I'm unattractive, but I've never thought that I was pretty. And I oftentimes have people say that to me, and I'm like, right? Because that voice is there that says you're ugly. And the fat part has been something that I've struggled with. I actually find it really interesting. Now with the awareness that I have and the tools that I have, I can definitely look at it all from a place of neutrality, but I also see where this notion has an impact on me. For example, today I will look at a photo of myself in present time and I will not like it. I'm going to actually shift that in a minute. But for example, right, I'll look at it in present time and I won't like it. And then 3 years from now, I'll see the same photo and I'll go, I looked really nice there. But in the present time prism that I'm looking at it, it's going through this filter of stupid, fat, and ugly. I have made a huge shift over the last couple of years, and I just want to just say here that no matter how aware, conscious, advanced we are, we're always working on something, right? I don't think that there may be people who are truly at that level of having completed all their work, bodhisattvas that come back to to really support humanity. But most of us are working on our stuff and evolving and shifting and growing all the time. So I don't profess perfection, and nor do I believe that any of us are actually like that's what we're trying to achieve. I think we're just constantly trying to grow and evolve. So now I find that when I look at photos, and I think I said this in a class space the one time where I was like, if you want to do something, you have to just do it. You can't wait until you think that you've lost enough weight or, you've achieved whatever. You just need to start doing it, because through these filters, it will always stop us from moving forward. But so now I'm at the place where I can listen to myself, I can watch a recording, I can look at photos of myself, and I really work to see myself in the moment as I am. So I kind of like that.
We've lost Christine for a second.
Oh, did we? Am I back?
Em, do you want to quickly tell us, when you counsel Women of India Summit members and you work with all the college girls, thousands of college girls you worked with, where's the most common thing you see this inner critical voice come up? We'll wait for Christine to come back. She'll be back soon enough. But till then?
I would say with self-image, like how they see themselves. And that's been like a big deal, because I can see with critical voice, it's also like our parents' voices where they're trying to help us when they were younger, where they would tell us things like, don't cross the road without looking, and don't put your hand in the hot thing or something, which was always there for us to, not injure ourselves. But as we grow older, a lot of those thoughts come in as our own, and they become limiting in that sense. So
Right.
I've been noticing a lot of that, where with a lot of people where they have that critical voice, which sort of still ripples out as they're older, and they don't realize how to capture it or nip it in the bud, and try to differentiate between their own voice and how they know what's good for them now, but when they were a child they didn't necessarily know that. And I mean, of course, with with Christine's, it was a little different, the example she was giving. But what I've seen is a lot of this critical voice where people have this sort of thing which their parents have said to them, or and how they perceive themselves to be as a result as well. I mean, that's the common thing, I think, between
We lost Christine for a minute, so MC was just, Motita was just filling in where she's seen it when she's counseling Women of India Summit members.
Yeah.
And she was talking about self-image. Christine is back.
Yeah.
Continue.
Well, I do. I mean, I think that it does, that critical voice has a huge impact on our self-image, which is a lot of what I was sort of getting at, is that, the words that we hear, the things that are said to us, end up being filters through which we see ourselves all the time, right? Whether we're looking in the mirror, or we're going for a job interview, or standing on stage speaking or singing, or whatever it is, those filters are how we see ourselves. And I think the reason that Stupid, Fat, and Ugly really resonated with everybody is because what I was beyond this experience that I had with my brother is the message of really being conscious and aware of whose voice it is that is saying those things, right? Because once we become aware of whose voice it is, and 99% of the time it's not going to be you. and if it is you, I want you to take a look underneath even deeper, because it's not you, right? There is no reason why we ourselves would speak so poorly to ourselves, right? That energy, that information, those words, they come from someplace else. They come from something that we've seen, something that we've been told, some way that somebody's interacted with us. But my experience in working with women is that when we dig and dig and dig, at the bottom of it, it's not them, right? It's not their voice. It's some voice that they have adopted as their own. I think it's really interesting to actually kind of hear it. And do you hear it in your own voice? Do you hear it in somebody else's voice? Because those two pieces of information give you tremendous more information to work on. So if you hear it in somebody else's voice, it's clear, right? That's not mine. I don't need that in my space. If you hear it in your own, it means that you really adopted this belief as the truth of who you are. And so there's a little more picking apart that needs to get done in order to release it. But the great thing is when it isn't ours, the work is really just releasing it.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pop in. We've got a lot of people saying, viewers who are joining us from around the world, saying hello. We're all on Be Live and not on Facebook. So just say, when you're saying hello, just say, this is Mudita, Divya, Christine saying hi from here, and you can drop in your question. Christine will take your questions at the end of this, because we are not on Facebook. So everyone's saying hi, but I don't know who's saying hi. So just say hello. And if you have had your own experience of your critical voice, let us know, what does it sound like? Who does it sound like? And when does it show up? Because I found working with clients, and for myself included, I'm not afraid of being on stage. I don't have the other fears that most people do. But I've noticed when the critical voice usually shows up when you're trying something new, when you're doing something that's out of your comfort zone. And that's what I've seen for my clients. I could be working with CEOs or superstars who are like superstars in their own right, what they do. But there'll be that one area in their lives that they're uncertain about, where they got a lot of flack from someone in their family who meant well, but in their unconsciousness said something horrible. And you can trace it back to, that's when it shows up for various people in multitudes of ways. For someone, it could be public speaking. For someone, it could be relationship, commitment issues. With most of us, it has something to do with women, it's always to do with our body, our beauty, and our perception of ourselves. And what I found working with you was a really helpful tool is I call Christine Master Shifu from Kung Fu Panda. So I always think of, and my sister is always the voice of love in my head. So whenever I'm doing something I'm not supposed to be doing, I've trained myself to look for Master Shifu and my sister, because these are the voices of love in my head. So I'm like, I've now trained my critical voice to be overridden by the voice of love. And I found that to be hugely helpful. But I think that takes a lot of time to become that self-aware. For someone who's starting out, Christine, what would be the first 2-3 tools that you would offer them to start, even become aware that, oh, this is not me. This is not how I think of myself.
And I think that's the starting place is, really becoming conscious of the critical voice that you hear, or voices that you hear. What is it saying? What is it saying? How does it sound? And then the next step is really taking a look at those voices and seeing if they belong to you, right? Is it your voice? And if you can really clearly see, oh no, that's my mother, right? She always said that to me. That's my mother. That's my brother. That's society. That's, media. That's the nun at school, right? Whoever it is. Yes. If we can identify it as not being us, then we start to separate ourselves from that. Sorry, I'm losing my earbuds here. Then we start to separate ourselves from that voice, right? Oh, not me. Right? Out it goes, out it goes. You can use visual imagery of sweeping it out of your space. You can use your breath to blow it out of your space. You could see it as a bubble and just pop it, right? So all sorts of different ways. You could write it down and tear it up. Lots of different ways to clear stuff out of our space. I don't ever think there's like a right or wrong way to do it. I think it really has to do with what resonates with you and what works best with you. And then the last piece is that, like I said, if you're like, oh yeah, no, that's me, I really think that about myself, then I really want to challenge you to sit with it and really I like to visualize it as a piece of cotton ball, like a dirty cotton ball, and I pick it apart. And as I pick it apart, I see what comes out. And oftentimes, people's faces come out, words come out, emotions, experiences like, oh yeah, there was that time when I did this and everybody laughed, right? Oh, so it's not me. Right.
Yeah.
So it's really just digging. And then I think, just to even go to very simple is when you could just automatically say your critical voice is not you. Like we could just go right there and not have to figure out who it is or what it is. And every time you hear it, just say no, put it out of your space. Like you're going to pluck it out of your head and put it over here somewhere and replace it with whatever truth you want to replace it with, right? So if it's I can't do it, replace it with of course I can do this. Even if you don't believe it in the moment, just replacing it with that starts to shift your mindset and moves you towards that place of course I can do this.
Mm. Is there a particular place that it shows up for the men clients you've had? Because women, I think because we're a women's, and I think there's so much, focus on the outward appearance of how women appear, whether how we perform, how we look, what size we are, how we come across. Are you, all the patriarchal narratives of are you dutiful, are you beautiful, are you obliging, are you giving? Right. Those are very obvious spaces for women I see, at least in my practice or when we work with women. Where do you see it for men? I'd be very curious about that.
Yeah, I think for men, it's it tends to show up in masculinity, right? Are you masculine enough? Are you manly enough? I think it shows up in success, right? Are you successful enough? And there's also this piece about being like being the provider. Like, are you, which is kind of tied to success, but that can also just be, are you providing the things that you're supposed to be providing? Really, when we're talking about the critical voice, we're talking about a lot of times, I think, the societal things that that we all like, that society believes, the sort of stereotypes of who we're supposed to be and how that gets imprinted on us by our family and by our teachers and by advertising and, all those different movies and stories and, all those different things. So, but I think those are a couple of really prominent places where men might have that critical voice. I think well, that's kind of a generalization. I was going to say, I think it's usually about achievement and success. That's what I got.
What I see, and Mudita will back this up, is we live in a metropolitan city, and what I see is now when we go to the gym or when you go to the sports center, the amount of time that I see men spending on their hair, their looks, and being very metrosexual, it's another form of currency. And I see them almost being as painstakingly prepped and primed as much as women are. And I look at these men and I'm very curious to know what's the internal dynamic that's going on in their head that tells them that that's another measure of success that you need to sort of work towards,
Yeah.
Because women have been objectified for centuries. That's something new. But now what I see is this, like when we go to the gym, I see these men and I'm like, all age groups. I'm very fascinated by what's the inner critical voice in their head.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of that goes to entertainment and media, right? And how programmed we are by what we see and who we see as successful. And I suppose in a way that can become an inner critic, right? Because we're comparing ourselves to that dynamic. I would say that more probably lends to self-validation though, right? Where our validation comes from, and believing that in order to be worthy, that we have to meet a certain standard, more than a voice in your head that's saying, that critical voice of, you can't do this, you can't be this, you can't have this, you don't look right, you're stupid, you're fat, you're ugly. Right? Yeah.
Because I remember doing this in theater work. When I would play a particular character, I would always think about what was the internal house that lived, how do they talk to themselves? And one of the things that I've learned from Mudita a lot is how, don't say things like, you're so stupid you did this. I'm such an idiot.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like you're perpetuating the abuse of that critical voice on yourself as an adult by saying, you're an idiot, you shouldn't have done this, to be, compassionate to oneself.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I have a 14-year-old son, for those of you who don't know. And there were times as he's been growing up where he said, like, oh, I'm so stupid. And I'm like, like, no, not even going there. And I just have always been really clear with him about, I'm just not using that word at all, like with others, with yourself. Such a harsh word, just such a harsh, demeaning word to use on ourselves, which, takes me back to, just, I think, conscious awareness of that critical voice and really thinking, like, why would I say something like this to myself? Right. So if that voice is running around in your head, even just that awareness of why would I think this? Why would I project this onto myself? And what other thing could I put there that's so much more loving and kind and caring to myself? Because, in so many ways, if we're not going to be that to ourselves, it's not going to happen outside of our space, right? When people aren't going to all of a sudden just be kind to us. And it does come when we start to really love ourselves and enjoy who we are in the moment of who we are. So I would say for people watching, that's a great, I call them ripple opportunities. So when I have conversations, it's like the ripple that comes from it. It's a great ripple opportunity to, to spend some time and just kind of love who you are. Like, and if it feels uncomfortable, that's okay. I remember, so when I was 12, this was around the same time of like kind of realizing that stupid, fat, and ugly wasn't serving me. Even though I did carry some of that forward for quite some time, but I realized if I wanted to be loved, I had to love myself. And we're talking pre-Dr. Phil, pre-Oprah. So I would sit on the floor in my bedroom. I had this beautiful full floor-length mirror. In the morning before I went to school, I would sit in front of the mirror and I would look into my eyes and I would tell myself that I love myself. And I did this over and over and over. And the first time that I did it, it was so uncomfortable. And for a long time, it was uncomfortable. And then finally I got to the place where I could do it and I meant it and I could look in my eyes, and it was really a transformational experience for me. And what's interesting about that is that I did some research, and around the time that Louise Hay was doing her mirror work, just starting to do her mirror work, was when I was doing this. And so one of the things about me is that I clearly have always been tapped into what's going on the collective consciousness. And so I'm bringing these things in. And even at the age of 12, I was bringing this stuff in that just, if my mom had seen me doing that, she would have been like, we have a problem here.
That's fantastic.
I really loved what Christine was saying, and I wanted to add to that this is something I do and I recommend a lot, is that, when you are also having that thought that's coming in, which sounds like critical voice, it's really important to kind of address it with a lot of love and kindness and compassion, because when we notice critical voice already happening, you're like, oh my God, this is my critical voice, and I'm gonna like bash it into submission, or I want it out of here, But I've actually noticed it's actually another opportunity for you to be nice to yourself, and which most people don't tell you, because everyone's like, oh, you should be like, up at 6 and going to the gym and really pushing yourself and going hard, like that kind of thing. But I've actually noticed myself, the kinder I am to myself, the more actually I feel like doing or want to do, and it feels more joyful and more fun. And the other advice that I would also give is that when you are having this critical voice moment, imagine someone you love the most in the world, like your child or your niece or your nephew or your dog, and imagine speaking to them the way that you speak to yourself in that critical voice. And would you do that? And most likely you wouldn't. And that's a really good way to, like, I think, catch yourself and kind of be kind and gentler about it as well. I really like that.
I'm laughing about the idea of using the critical voice to attack the critical voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, which we do all the time.
Yeah, all the time. You shut up. Don't say this to me.
Yeah.
You know what I also notice is when you trace, when I work with people and I work with myself on certain things, like I didn't realize, MC Mudita will tell you, I have a real fear with, not fear, but I'm really uncomfortable. People get very close to me physically, unless I want them to. I don't like closed spaces and I don't like elevators. And if there's like, if I'm at the back of the elevator, that's it, I'm getting out. And I actually traced it back to that. I had a relative when I was young who used to say this to me to discipline me. She used to say that I am going to behave yourself. She used to say it in Hindi. I can't say it. The edge and the sharpness is lost when I say it in English. But she used to say this to me that if you don't do what I'm saying and you don't behave yourself, I'm going to bury you alive. And I put you under the ground and your mother will not know that she'd given birth to you. And I know this person and I know she loved me and she meant it in a way to discipline me. But I remember walking home from school when I was 8 or 9 and 12 and thinking, if she buries me in the ground, I'll suffocate and die. How many days would it take me to suffocate and die? And how will my mother not know that she'd given birth to me? And I remember I used to have these scenarios that I was, as an 8-year-old, you're thinking. And when I was doing my own work that I'd work with clients on their, internal problem, I call it my LOC work, the line of control, where everyone has a line of control where they can't cross. And it's related to this inner critical voice, whoever told them whatever when they were growing up. And I know that this person didn't mean it in a bad way. I think she was just trying to discipline me in what she thought was an effectual way, but it didn't work. And the way it's translated it for me as an adult is that I get very uncomfortable in closed spaces. And I'm aware of that now when I get in an elevator or when people get very close to me after a performance or after a workshop. I have to remind myself that it's a safe space. I'm not. And this is why I was really curious to ask you that because you're a mom, and you have a 14-year-old, and there are days where you want to discipline them. And I often see this with clients, with myself, with the people that I worked with, that oftentimes a lot of these critical voices weren't meant to be mean, but they were. So as a parent or as an aunt or as somebody who's potentially in the care of a little person, how do you stay aware that you're not inflicting damage that they're going to need therapy for 10 years, 20 years down the line?
My desire, I don't know that I've always met it because of course we're human. But my desire in my relationship with my son has always been to be truthful with him. And so, a lot of these things that are said to us they're not true, right? They're not even remotely truthful. They're just exaggerations to shock and awe somebody into control. So, and I mean, I've been with Caden for 14 years, and ever since even before he was born, when he was in utero, I was having conversation with him and connecting with him, and have always talked to him about the choice that he made to be here, the choice that he made for me to be his mother, the choice that I made for him to be my son. So we definitely have a different kind of relationship space, I think, than the average person, or the average parent-child dynamic. But I think being truthful is really important. I don't think threatening a child is ever effective. You might get to where you're going in the short term, but basically what you're teaching them is to be manipulative. You're teaching them to be that fear is a way to control somebody. You're teaching them to question their own truth, because somewhere within themselves, they know what's being said is not true. Yet, as someone who's who they look up to, and they need something from you, they've got to kind of go along with it. So it starts to bend what I like to call their truthometer, right? The truthometer is that like internal knowingness that we just have of like, this is true, this is not true. And the more that we're told things that aren't true, but are made to believe that they are true, whether it's survival or because we totally respect the person who's saying it, our truthometer starts to bend. And so then we start to question our own truth. Because we can't, we're like, wait, I thought this was true, but clearly it's not. So then clearly like how I feel something is true isn't really true, right? So it just creates this whole dynamic. So the short answer to that is I think that it's really important to, one, treat children with respect, and to speak to them truthfully and honestly, to never threaten them and to never bribe them. So ways that I would do that are, let's say Hayden was little and I wanted him to do something. The sort of bribing, threatening way would be, what was it? If you don't do this, you're not going to get this. So there's that way, right? If you don't clean up your room, you're not going to the park. That's a threat, right? A bribe is, you can go to the park if you clean up your room, right? Or clean up your room and then you can go to the park, right? It's a bribe. My approach would always be, we really want to go to the park, but we can't do it. We've got to clean up your room first. That's the first thing that we need to do. When we clean up your room, then we can go do other things. But it was never this for that. And I think that makes a big difference in the way that we're that we teach our children to become adults, really.
I think it's also to do with, you constantly talk about self-validation. And I like that you didn't say to him that I'll be very happy with you if you do XYZ, because you're telling them, you're making them dependent on your approval. And,
yes.
So instead of saying that, saying, we can't go to the park till, the room's not clean. It's a very different kind of.
And it's slight shifts in verbiage and presentation. Also with the self-validation piece, one thing that I was really clear with him was that when he would come to me with something that he was really excited about, I would never say to him, oh, I'm so proud of you. I would always start with, oh, you must be so proud of yourself. That's so wonderful. And I'm so happy for you. Right. And it wasn't about how I felt about what he was doing. It was about how he must feel having accomplished whatever it was that he accomplished. And to this day, I'll hear him say, I'm really proud of myself. Right. And it's like, awesome. Right. That's self-validation. That's finding the joy and the reward within yourself. And it doesn't mean that I am not proud of him and that I don't tell him that I'm proud of him. I'm just very conscious to always make his own joy in himself the first thing,
Yeah. Okay, so if this is the time to ask a question, if you have one. Emma, you want to go with something?
No, I think that was wonderful. I really love the saying, yeah.
Thank you. Christine, I really wanted to ask you if you could leave us with one thing before we wrap up. I don't know about the rest of the world so much, but I can tell you for the number one thing that I see with women across the board, whether I work with somebody in a village or in a small town or in a big city, there's a lot of, in the subcontinent, in Asian culture, especially in India, especially in North India, there's a lot of people passing judgment on women, right? From whatever age you are. Like I remember even now, and I see it across the board with very educated urban women, where you go to a party, you go to a dinner party, you go to a ladies' lunch, you go to a family function, somebody or the other, whether the child is 2, the child is 4, she's 16, 18, 45, 70, it's like their moral imperative to make a judgment about the way you look, your size, your hair, your skin color. Oh, you look really beautiful today. And it's not from a place of, I'm happy to see you and you're lovely and it doesn't matter. It's not so much about your energy. It's just, there's always sort of a judgment being passed on you. And I have my own spiel on, patriarchal narratives, control, power, disempowerment. But I would love to just before we end, maybe leave some our audience with something to think about this business of passing, because I see this a lot about people passing comments on each other's, especially to women, and I think that doesn't help. Like when I work with clients, and I've seen this myself, on self-esteem and rebuilding your internal narrative and making friends with your inner critic and sort of putting it in its place. Because at some point that inner critic in some ways helped you survive or helped you learn something about yourself or helped you stand up for yourself. But for young women with children, women with siblings, is there something that you could leave us with about this business of passing these comments? Because this feeds that inner critical voice, right? And if you're feeling like you're not feeling good about yourself today, and then someone says to you, you look tired, or, your age is really showing on you, or something, there's always somebody to say something, right?
Nice. Don't ever say that, right? That's the short, just stop it. So I mean, it's kind of like a bigger topic. I mean, it's really, what I talk about when I talk about symptoms of disempowerment, that there is this sort of, I think, patriarchally driven divide and conquer that's been set up between women because when we come together, we're so powerful. Right? We're just so incredible and so powerful. So there has been this systemic dynamic of kind of teaching us to divide and conquer, to separate ourselves so that we aren't supporting each other and coming together. And a lot of that is shifting, and we see that shift in what's going on around the world, and women stepping into roles of power and political power. But if we sort of back up and just look at those judgments and those criticisms, really what's at the root of them is, I believe, is our own wounding and invalidation. And when we judge somebody or criticize them, we feel empowered. We feel better about ourselves. And it really makes us feel like, whether we know something or we see something, or I would never do it that way, like whatever it is, whatever the comment that's coming out of our mouth. So I do think at the core of all of this is learning to validate yourself, learning to fill in with your own energy and be full of yourself. And I think in terms of shifting that dynamic without any energy work or tools, it really is as simple as the 3 steps that takes to change something. First is being aware of it, which usually happens after the fact. So when we go out and we look back at the night and we see the things that we said to people, right? That awareness of, that wasn't good. Something I shouldn't say, not going to do that again. So we become aware of it after the fact. Then we become aware of it while we're like doing it. So when we're doing it, it's like something's coming out of our mouth and we're like, right? Then we start to become aware of it like before we do it. We see this, we hear it in our head and we decide, I'm not going to say that. That's not where I'm going to go. And we put the thought out of our head. So it is, we have to do the work. We have, whatever it is, we have to do the work, and things just don't shift. I don't want to say they don't shift easily, but you have to be doing the work. You can't just be like, okay, I'm going to change this and then not actually do anything to try to change it. That typically doesn't work. But I think, these sort of 3-step process is a great way to start to change that judgmental, critical that comes out when we see people. If you see somebody and she's wearing red shoes, your thought might be like, oh, those shoes look ridiculous. Why? Like, she obviously loves them. So celebrate the fact that she loves her red shoes, right? Just go there. Don't go over here.
Yeah. My mom has a great line. She always says to us, we're not social reformers. You don't have to go around telling people that this doesn't, she always says, we're not social reformers. You don't have to go around telling people what they're doing right. And I thought that's a great sort of gentle, old-fashioned way to look at it. And it's a really powerful way to say that you don't have to go around converting everyone to the way you want to want things to be done in that respect. I find that really.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as long as it's not impacting you, because then you have the choices of change it, accept it, or get rid, leave it. Right? Those are your choices. Those are the choices.
Like to stop that. Stop that.
Yeah, just stop it.
All the time. Stop it. Oh, Christine, you've given us the topic for the next one. We're going to do symptoms of disempowerment, right, Em? Yeah. That's going to be a loaded one. We're going to have to do like a 5-part thing. Thank you so much for being with us. I know how busy you are. I really appreciate you both taking out the time to do this with me and present this to our fantastic audience. Christine, do you want to just quickly tell us where people can find you?
Sure. You can find me at awakenandgrow.com. I have a lovely group on Facebook, which is Awaken and Grow, and on all social media, which is just at Christine Agro. Oh, and the book, Awaken and Grow, A Practical Guide to Your Spiritual Journey, for your spiritual journey. Basically just takes you through everything that we experience on our spiritual journey and helps you to better understand it, because I think once you know what's going on, then you can really step into an empowered way of moving through your life, rather than feeling like, why does this keep happening? And how come that happened? It's all explainable.
Thank you so much for being here and for all the fantastic
information. Thank you. I love being here.
Thank you to all our audience and my fantastic co-host for joining us. If you have questions, topics you'd like us to cover in the future, you can find Mudita and me at WomenOfIndiaSummit.com, and you can find me at DivyaChandra.com. Thank you again for joining us, and until next time, leave us a question or a comment in the bottom. Bye. And it's refusing to end. It's really, we've still obviously got something to say.